Great. Thank you very much, Thomas. I appreciate it. I was here last year, and when I got here last year, what I was really doing was researching what can we be looking at for the first deployment of an AI agent at RHI Magnesita. And we had a couple use cases that we were looking at first and finally settled on one toward the end of last year, and we're now about 5 or 6 months into the process of it. So just to give you some quick background, who is RHI Magnesita? What do we do? We are a mining and manufacturing company. We make refractory products for high temperature insulating ceramics. We have manufacturing sites that include mining sites around the world with clusters in China, in India, in Europe, Turkey. You can see a very large one in North America and also in South America. And bouncing off of the reindustrialization of the United States, we import somewhere around 40% of our total sales in North America, which is around $1 billion out of the $4 billion in total that we have. We are in the process of acquiring one of our competitors here in the States, and that will make us less reliant on imported products from around the world from our other sites. We're really in a situation where we're transforming our organization not only from the digital standpoint, but also from our sourcing standpoint and onboarding somewhere around 10 new production sites in the United States. So we were looking for something that we could do to be ready for when this entire merger happens, but also to address some specific problems that all of us had. In this case, one of the biggest issues that we had was the human factor that was in there. It was people that are physically entering orders into the system, but it isn't just that mechanical side of it. The customer service or inside sales position encompasses order planning, it encompasses transportation. There are a lot of things that are out there that are not just very specific to doing that manual transaction. The biggest reason that we had for this was error avoidance. And when you think of a manual process and you think of what CSRs do, there's some person that is constantly entering information into a system. And there's all kinds of opportunities that you have for errors that are in there. One of the big things that you have is non-standardization of what the processes are. We don't have a formalized training process for this. So the traditional way that we do it is you partner up a more experienced CSR with a less experienced CSR. They sit together for somewhere around 6 months. You gradually give them more and more tasks that they can do, and in the end, you hope that they're doing them correctly. But if you can imagine, different people train other people different ways. Everybody's got their own specific way of doing it. We never had some kind of a standardized process that people could interact with. And finally, what we're really trying to do is get ready for our digital transformation. We currently use SAP R3 as our ERP system. They're going to turn off the switch on that in 2026 since it's been around since about 1997. So we're needing to get ready for that. That implementation will be happening over about the next year or so for us in North America, over the next 2 years around the world. What we're looking for is some kind of a bridge that goes from the old system into the new system, but also incorporating a number of other software systems that we have. What was the solution? After working together with Itomatic, we came up with their industrial virtual advisor, and the goal of this from the start has been error reduction. How do we get to the point that errors, if they happen, get caught, but not even getting the errors put into the system? What we realized in doing this is that there's much more to the job than what any CSR is entering into it. It's a multi-dimensional function, and you typically have CSRs as being an entry-level position. So they don't know the customers, they don't know the products, they don't know the industry. They've got all of this that they need to learn, and yet they're the people that we rely on to generate $1 billion for us in revenue. It's been an underserved group of people that are in there, and putting together this agent for us is one of the ways that we have to really empower what they're doing and to upskill people. Now, going off of Christopher's talk from earlier, our group was originally in Canada, then through other regionalization that we had, they moved to South America and were based out of Brazil. And then within about the last 12 months, we've moved them from Brazil back up to Mexico. So we currently have groups in Canada, United States, and Mexico. And one of the really interesting things in coming from this is we've seen the adoption of this from that CSR group in Mexico happening very quickly. They got it, they understood it, they were interested in it right from the start. That's been a big fun part of it, is really to be able to see that people see a future in the organization, they see a future in what we're doing, and really helping us out in moving forward with what our goals are for the future. One of the other things that we forget about is just training. What does it cost to train people? For me, for a group of about 33 people, if I need to fly them somewhere in the United States or Canada, we need to get them all together in a room for a week to do training. That's somewhere around $50,000 for that meeting for us to be able to do it. Once they get done with that meeting, after sitting there for a week, they go back to their regular jobs, they probably forget 50% of what it was. So even though we're doing the training, is it really effective? Are we getting something that's out of it? And really, in the end, we found that we haven't been doing that. So we needed some kind of solution that was from it, and that's why we ended up with the AI agent that we have from iTomatic. So what does the deployment look like? What has this really been? These are only my thoughts from some of the people in the organization, some of the people we've been working with. What are the stages of putting this in from the side of your customers? So for those of you that are the developers, the ones that are working with this, it's what are they really going through? Do they know what it is? So I'm going to walk through all of these steps as I go through the presentation. The first one is, what the hell is it? And this may sound funny because we're here in Silicon Valley, everybody knows what it is, but you would be amazed when you start introducing this in an organization outside of here. Most people aren't even sure. I called it, maybe they have a little bit of an idea of the name brand chatbots, because that's what I kind of figure they are. But at most, they've done something like, give me a 3-day itinerary for Paris. It doesn't really, they haven't really used it. Really getting the messaging, getting them to understand what the idea is behind the agent and what the agent can do was a big part of the early adoption of this. For myself, with the upper management group that we're in, it's my fellow regional leadership team members, there was one very big problem that we had. Back in 2023, we could attribute about $3 million in human error just in the order processing, invoicing, and accounts receivable side that we experienced as a result of pure human errors. And we all looked around at each other and we said, what can we do? How do you avoid human error? It's a very difficult thing to do, especially when you have a group that's spread out across 3 countries and somebody trying to stay on top of it. That, for us, was the reason why we decided to invest in the technology and to take it forward. We didn't know where it was going. I got a lot of help from many of you who are here in the audience from last year in getting it ready, but that was the main motivating factor for us. Another big one is resource allocation, and we don't really think about that, but from the upper management side, we're spread thin. When you get down to the next level of the line managers, we're spread thin. Then you get down to the level of entry-level people, and how do you get them on board? How do you get them ready? How do you get them moving? Resource allocation is something that's on our minds every single day. What this has the possibility to do for us is get people trained faster on what they're doing. The messaging, and if there's no other message that you get from this today, the messaging that you give to everybody in your organization is that AI does not replace jobs. I will tell you, you can't say that enough to your groups that are out there. It doesn't replace jobs. What it does is it trains people faster, it motivates people, it gives them opportunities that they probably wouldn't have had if they were just sitting and typing stuff into a system. It allows people to think, it allows people to do more things from where they were before. And that's a big part of it. Our line managers, biggest problem you have, you may have an underperforming employee, but you hold on to them because the problem with hiring somebody and training somebody is so difficult. Why do I want to get into it? If we have a solution to that, then all of a sudden you can allow your managers to manage and build your team up stronger. And finally, for the employees, the group in Mexico, when we first introduced it, I had Thomas on the call, and it was fantastic because they got it. You could see the lights going off for all of them to say, if we adopt this, if I'm doing something with artificial intelligence, all of a sudden my resume looks better. But even within the organization, I have the opportunity to advance and go somewhere else. Those were really the motivating factors that we had in there. But once you start explaining all of this, you start getting down to the level, I think Christopher mentioned this also, I can do that in PowerPoint. I can do that in Excel. What's really the difference that's in it? Because everybody doesn't get the idea that's behind it. And the way that I explain it to everybody is that this AI agent becomes an operating system for the function that you're doing. Less than 50% of the functions that the CSRs do is actually into the SAP system. And it's that other 50% that you have out there, that unstructured part of their job, that's open to interpretation. Anybody can do it anyway. And when they don't follow those rules and put them in there, it leads to errors. It leads to that $3 million P&L impact that we had. But the other thing that we found is that the Agentic AI really becomes a one-stop shop. For a CSR to get ready to enter an order, they have to open up a PowerPoint to make sure that they're going through all of the screens correctly in SAP. They have to open up their master price list to make sure that they're entering the correct price that's on there. They need to know what the customer requirements are for transportation, for payment terms, for special invoicing instructions that they have. Maybe they have their own item numbers that need to go on there. Those are all things that are completely outside of the function of actually entering orders in there. They need to go to 5, 6, 7 different locations to put all of that together before they even do anything. What we found with this AI agent is that all of that's already loaded in there. They can get the answer by asking one simple question to the agent, and it's all there at their fingertips. Only trained on our stuff. So when we start talking about, are we getting the right answers? Is the right information coming from there? Yeah, it is, because it's all coming directly from price lists that we have. Unless we haven't updated those, it's not going to know what anything else is. And then finally, the standardization tool. We're not there yet because we've only started using it, but as we start training the new generations of CSRs to interact with this, we'll start getting everybody doing it the same way, because the model is giving us the information back the same way for everybody. No longer do you have somebody maybe being trained by a great CSR and they become a great CSR, or somebody being trained by an okay CSR, and then they're really only going to ever be an okay CSR. We actually have a standardization model that we can use. So moving on from that, you start explaining this, you start talking about it, and everybody starts getting super excited about it. They say, oh, wow, AI can do everything for us. This is fantastic. And people start coming out of the woodwork saying, could we get it to do this? Could you help me out with forecasting? Could you help me out with all these other things? In that early stage, you'll have a lot of people coming to you, asking you those questions. I think even as the providers for this to industry, you may have them coming to you saying, I've got all these other ideas. Can we keep doing all of them? And what I would really encourage you to do is prioritize that initial case that you have, because it's super easy to fall into the trap of trying to put everything together and losing the focus for what that beginning part of it is. You have to remember that as providers of these AI agents, your project managers, your advisors, your coaches that are in it, and you want to keep everybody on track for that, because if you don't, it's going to take a lot longer to do the implementation. But what you definitely want to make sure that you do is all of those ideas that are coming through, go to each one of those people and say, start gathering your data, get your use case together. Let's talk about it. Let's start the discussion of what it is. Let's get prepared for it, because getting that background side of it done is what makes or breaks everything to stay on track for getting to that proof of concept stage. Next stage. Wait, we have to do all this work still? I think when we sit here, we think about it from industry, we think about AI, and there should be this magic AI fairy that comes and waves their wand, and all of a sudden it's got all of the answers for my business and everything's actually there. It just isn't the case. That was probably the most surprising thing that I had, is just how much information we need to get together, that we need to enter into the model, that we have to be ready to train on. On the internal side, collaborating with a lot of managers. So we talk about the CSR function as the order entry function, but it's also production planning that we have. It's transportation that we have. We need to get all of that information in there so that what comes out of the agent is as accurate as possible. For us, the biggest problem that we had, we didn't have any real training materials. We had some PowerPoints that were in there. We talked about, we already got PowerPoints to train people, but some of those were outdated. Our initial implementation of the R3 system that I did back in 2000, and some of it's a little bit stale now. So even as we were going through some of these, the team from iTomatic was questioning, is this really valid? Is it still there? And we had interviews that we had on video that we did together with them so that we could get the right answers and do demonstrations of what the tasks were to validate the information that was sitting on some of the PowerPoint training presentations. Not only that, we've been able to put together what a formalized training would look like. Then you get into some of the fun parts of the prompt training. We came up with something like 300 different questions that CSRs gave to us asking about what their function is. Here's the different things that I need to do. We were able to use those questions as part of setting up the model so that the end result were questions that they actually had. Not things that we thought they would be, but what's bothering a CSR? What do they really want to know? Then we finally get into the testing phase. When you ask it a question, is it giving you the right answers? Usually yes, but sometimes no. Sometimes we're getting some crazy things that were out of it. And then one last thing to remember, especially for the folks in industry, is data sharing. And how do you share the data? The most basic thing. How do you get it from your company's information? That's probably really locked down. I don't know about everybody, but my company locks down. I can't even use Chrome on my laptop. So trying to get that data out of your organization to somebody else that you can use. Even with great NDAs that you have in there, even with the help from everybody, it was still a real trick. Eventually, we found a loophole with Microsoft Teams that we could get a shared Teams folder and some access, and we managed to work it out. But it took a lot of negotiation internally to get to that. And I can't overemphasize the idea that the team that's doing the implementation needs to be extremely strong. And we have been very fortunate working with Thomas, working with Quinn, working with the team at iTomatic, because for the folks that are as the suppliers out there, you need to be those coaches, you need to be those motivators, you need to be the project manager. You're going to find people that haven't done anything like this, and you guys are the experts. We need your help in doing these implementations. When you get all of that done, when you focus on the use cases, you can really save a lot of time on the front end. And I said we're about 5 months into this. That's where I missed out a little bit, was getting that data together right at the start. So the next phase, this is where it gets ugly. AI can't do anything for us. Some of the initial outputs that you get from the models can be a little bit underwhelming because it hasn't been trained on the prompts. It's not there yet with the real world questions. The answers might be very basic that are coming from it. And the messaging with the teams has to be really tight at this point in time. You need to remind them of what were the parameters of that proof of concept. What were we trying to do? In our case, it was one customer, one order type. But everybody's interacting with the model, asking it all kinds of different questions that it doesn't even know the answer to. And if you get that messaging right, it's great, because in the end, you get to the, whoa, this is pretty cool stage. And that's exactly what I heard from one of our CSRs. Once we got the interaction with them, once they started working together with the model, they realized, and this came from them, not from us, that there's a lot of things that it's telling us that we could use to organize our jobs and help us in what we're doing. What is our daily task? What are our weekly tasks? Put together the things that I need to do every single month. Not only that, what we could see was that we really had the makings of something that wasn't just the order entry thing, but it's order planning and customer management and inventory management, reconciliation, and then in the end, maybe the coolest thing that we're working on is taking the end invoice and being able to upload it in the model and do an accuracy check on that invoice. And that's that error reduction phase. When we get to that, we will really have it. So it's making sure that the unit of measurement is right, the price is right, the customer instructions are all on there so that when the customer gets the invoice, they actually pay it. Because I don't know about everybody's customers, but if there's one little thing wrong, they have a tendency to not pay the invoice, which leads to cash flow problems. So we're really seeing this as something that's transforming that entry-level CSR position into kind of a hybrid CSR, supply chain sales and inventory analyst. In fact, just this morning, Ben Lorica had a great article on generative AI transforming the analyst position. And I've got a demonstration here that's going to show you what it looks like when we actually go through what our model is. I'm going to stand over to this side so that everybody can see it. as we're getting into this first one, these are some questions that CSRs have asked or might be responses to questions that the CSRs are getting from their salespeople. And what you'll be able to see is how the model is handling this, and this is some of the very beginning stages. Remember, this is after our proof of concept happened in May. This is only a few months after that. The first question was, what 5 materials does CMC Florida order, and including the item number and the description of it? That's something that would typically come from a salesperson. They'll call up their CSR and say, hey, enter an order for a truckload of the same thing that we shipped last month to them. This was really surprising. This was one of my aha moments, because for me, this would have taken me probably 15 minutes to go through an Excel file to get to it. And you can see the detail that comes out of this. Here's the top 5 items that they have. Here's the last times that they ordered them, and here's how much they ordered in all of those. That's already getting to some analysis that would take a long time to do. Secondarily to that, we say that we've got an order for them. What are some of the special considerations? What are those special things that this customer requires? This is that unstructured 50% that I was talking about. And sure enough, it goes through and it will come up with all of the details that you need for this item for that customer. Again, you're getting to that error avoidance. It has, what are the weights and packaging? Making sure that you're using the right kind of packaging. What are the shipping terms? Is it delivered? Is the customer handling the freight? What are the payment terms? Making sure you get the right things on the invoice so the customer actually pays the invoice. What's the order history been? What do they need from it? This is something that was not part of that original concept that we had, but as we started interacting with that agent, we started seeing what could come from it. And then finally, getting really down into where I think this is going to go for the organization is it says the customer ordered 5,000 units of this item. Does that seem reasonable? And this is great because now we're getting into the idea that there's the AI reasoning happening in the background. And you won't typically see this as the person that's using it, but it's great for the demonstration to show what iTomatic's agent was able to put together in the background, running through all of that, and then coming with an output to say that, yes, in fact, 5,000 units of this does absolutely make sense. I can think for myself of being able to use this on almost a daily basis as I'm going through the analysis, asking it, give me the 5 items that are at the lowest margins for North America. That would take me a couple hours to dig through spreadsheets to do, whereas we're coming up with it on this agent already. Again, in the very, very early stages with it, and we're still learning what we can do with it. Go ahead and move on. So we finally get to the stage of, but what if it could? And this is where I start talking about it, that analyst stage, can we move on from there? As I mentioned, we're getting ready for our global digital transformation, and being in charge of it for North America, there are several different pieces of software that we have to incorporate in addition to the SAP system. We're going to be training people on a supply chain management software and transportation management software, a whole new sales and production forecasting module, and also upgrades to our plants. Each one of those, we need to train people. We need to bring people in for that. And I really see this developing into a number of different agents that are in there for those specific tasks, and maybe even for upper management, that there could be one overarching factor that would be in there. So from my standpoint, I think of an AI agent really as the operating system. If we all think back to DOS and what it was like to do the keyboard commands and everything, computers didn't get popular until Windows came about and you had an operating system. Think of that agentic AI as that same kind of thing. It's taking that analog process that you had, that unstructured process, and turning it into the operating system for your business. What else does it do? It democratizes the data. Right now, I don't know if your industries are the same as mine, but there's usually 3 or 4 people that are really the Excel jockeys, the ones that put together the Power BI reports, and somebody has to call them up and ask them to run a report for them. You don't have to do that anymore. All you need to do is think of the question, and it feeds off of the sales data that we already have there, that sits there, that takes a lot of time to do. But empowering managers, because right now we have a big problem that we've got 6 major projects. We've got a digital transformation that's going on. We have a merger and acquisition that's happening in the middle of this. So all of us members of the regional leadership team, we've got several of us that are stepping out of our regular jobs to achieve this. Who backfills that? What's sitting in there? Using one of these agents for those specific areas is going to bring those new managers up to speed much faster. We also have a tendency to take technical experts and turn them into managers instead of using people who are true people managers, and that's what they enjoy doing. This allows you to take people who are the good people managers and teach them the technical side. And that opens up a whole new world of possibilities for us. And then finally, as a global organization, we're kicking this off in North America first, but what it will allow us to do is have an easier transfer of managers, that better cultural exchange that we have in there, even going to plant best practices and real-time KPI tracking that are in there. If we can upload this into those systems, we have that global standardization. Not meaning that everybody's doing everything the exact same way, but we all have that same one truth that sits behind there. And that's really where I see this going for us. So hopefully this gave you some ideas of what could possibly happen for your organizations, or if you are a supplier to these organizations, what they're going through. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for the support of the community, as we talked about. If it wasn't for being here and interacting with people, you don't get those ideas. So thank you very much, everyone.